You have told yourself this before. Tonight you will sleep less than you should, maybe 5 hours, maybe less. And you have already decided that it is fine because you will make it up on the weekend. Saturday you will sleep in. Sunday you will sleep in. By Monday you will be back to normal. This is one of the most widespread beliefs about sleep that exists, and it is wrong in a way that matters more than most people realize. Because the debt you are running up is not the kind that gets cleared when you make a larger payment later. Your body does not work on a credit system, where the balance resets when the deposits exceed the withdrawals. It works on a system where certain withdrawals leave marks that no deposit can fully erase. And by the time you feel fine on Monday morning, the marks are already there, recorded at a level your conscious experience cannot access, in places your weekend of sleeping in could not reach. Sleep science has known for decades that sleep deprivation impairs cognitive function. This is not a controversial finding. What is more recent and considerably more unsettling is the research on what chronic mild sleep restriction does to the body over time, as opposed to the acute total deprivation that most people picture when they think about the consequences of not sleeping. The difference matters enormously. Total sleep deprivation for multiple days produces dramatic, visible, undeniable impairment. You feel it. You know it is happening. Chronic mild restriction, sleeping 6 hours instead of 8. For 2 weeks, sleeping 5 hours instead of 8 for a week, produces impairment that accumulates invisibly. You adapt to it. You stop noticing it. And that adaptation is not recovery. It is your brain recalibrating its sense of normal downward, losing the ability to accurately measure its own deficit, and continuing to function at a reduced level while reporting to you that everything is fine. The biological mechanism that drives sleep pressure begins with a molecule called adenosine. While you are awake, your neurons are active, and as a byproduct of that activity, adenosine accumulates in the brain. The longer you stay awake, the more adenosine builds up, and the sleepier you feel. This is the direct chemical signal of sleep pressure, the brain's way of measuring how much sleep it needs and communicating that need to the rest of the system. When you sleep, adenosine is cleared. The pressure dissipates. You wake feeling restored. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, which is why it reduces the feeling of sleepiness without actually reducing the underlying adenosine load. The adenosine is still there. The receptor is just not receiving the signal, which means the debt that caffeine masks is real and continues to accumulate even when you cannot feel it. What chronic sleep restriction does to this system is to gradually raise the baseline level of adenosine that the brain has learned to operate with, which is why people who chronically undersleep often report that they no longer feel particularly tired. They are not less tired. They have simply stopped accurately perceiving how tired they are. The measurement instrument has been miscalibrated by the very condition it is supposed to be measuring. In 2003, Hans van Dongen and his colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania published a study that demonstrated this miscalibration in a way that has not been adequately absorbed by the general public. They restricted participants to 6 hours of sleep per night for 14 days and tested their cognitive performance repeatedly throughout the study. The results were striking. By the end of 2 weeks, the 6-hour sleep group was performing at a level of cognitive impairment equivalent to participants who had been kept completely awake for 24 hours straight. They were functioning at a level comparable to legal intoxication. But here is the part that matters most. When asked to rate their own sleepiness throughout the study, the 6-hour group consistently underestimated their impairment. Their subjective sense of how tired they were did not track with their actual performance. They believed they had adapted. They believed they were fine. They were not fine. They had simply lost the ability to know they were not fine. The most dangerous feature of chronic sleep debt is not that it impairs you. It is that it impairs your ability to recognize that you are impaired. The instrument you would use to check whether you are okay is the same instrument that is broken. But the story does not end with cognitive performance, because the damage that chronic sleep restriction leaves behind is not only functional, it is structural, and it operates at a level of biological organization that your weekend of sleeping in cannot touch. Your chromosomes end in protective caps called telomeres, sequences of repetitive DNA that protect the chromosome from degradation, the way the plastic tip on a shoelace protects the fabric beneath it. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres shorten slightly. When they become too short, the cell can no longer divide and either stops functioning or dies. Telomere length is one of the most studied biological markers of cellular aging, and shorter telomeres are associated with earlier onset of age-related disease, higher rates of cardiovascular disease, and shorter lifespan. Multiple studies have now found consistent associations between chronic short sleep duration and accelerated telomere shortening. A 2012 study published in the journal Aging found that adults who slept fewer than 6 hours per night had shorter telomeres than those who slept 7 hours or more. A 2017 analysis in Sleep Medicine found similar associations in a sample of over 2,000 participants. Your cells are aging faster, not metaphorically, measurably, at the level of the molecular machinery that determines how many times your cells can still divide. And this process does not pause on Saturday morning when you finally sleep in. The reason sleep deprivation accelerates cellular aging is connected to what sleep is actually doing at the cellular level while you are unconscious. During sleep, and specifically during deep, slow wave sleep, the body activates repair mechanisms that are suppressed during waking hours. One of the most critical of these is DNA. Damage repair. Every day, your cells accumulate DNA damage from normal metabolic activity, from environmental exposures, from the simple operation of being alive. Your genome has sophisticated repair mechanisms to identify and correct this damage before it becomes permanent. These repair mechanisms require energy, and the competition for cellular energy resources during waking hours, when the body has 100 other demands to meet, means that DNA repair is partially deprioritized during the day. Sleep is when the repair queue gets processed. When you chronically cut your sleep short, you are chronically cutting the repair window short, and the damage that was not fixed during the abbreviated sleep period carries forward. It accumulates. Over months and years, the accumulation of unrepaired DNA damage is one of the mechanisms through which chronic sleep deprivation contributes to elevated cancer risk, to accelerated cellular aging, to the suite of degenerative conditions that have consistently been associated epidemiologically with insufficient sleep. The body also records sleep debt in its inflammatory status. C-reactive protein and interleukin-6 are markers of systemic inflammation that can be measured in the blood, and both have been consistently found to be elevated in individuals who chronically undersleep. Inflammation at low levels is a normal part of immune function. Chronic low-grade inflammation is a different matter. It is associated with cardiovascular disease, with insulin resistance, with depression, with neurodegeneration. It is one of the biological mechanisms through which chronic sleep deprivation connects to nearly every major category of chronic disease. And it is measurable. If you drew blood from someone who had been sleeping 6 hours a night for 2 weeks and compared their inflammatory markers to someone who had been sleeping 8 hours, you would see a difference. The body does not forget. It does not reset on Monday. It is keeping a record that is more accurate than anything your subjective sense of tiredness could produce. And the record is written in molecules that persist long after the night that produced them is gone. Here is what recovery research actually shows, because this is where most people want to find the reassuring paragraph. And the reassuring paragraph is partial at best. Yes, some of the functional impairments from sleep debt do recover with extended sleep. Performance on certain cognitive tasks improves after recovery sleep. Inflammatory markers can decrease. Adenosine clears. You feel better, but the telomere damage does not reverse. The DNA repair that did not happen during the shortened sleep window cannot be retroactively performed. The structural cellular aging that accumulated during weeks and months of insufficient sleep cannot be undone by a weekend. The metabolic disruption that has been linked to chronic short sleep, including the changes in glucose regulation and appetite, hormone signaling that connects sleep deprivation to obesity and type 2 diabetes risk, does not fully normalize in the short recovery windows that most people's lives realistically allow. Recovery sleep is real and it matters. It is also incomplete in ways that are specific, measurable, and permanent. You have told yourself before that tonight is fine, that the weekend will fix it, that your body is more forgiving than the researchers suggest. Your body is not keeping your account the way you think it is. It is not tracking how many hours you slept last week against how many hours you slept this week and producing a balance. It is tracking something else entirely. It is tracking the nights your chromosomes aged slightly faster than they should have. The nights the DNA repair queue backed up. The nights the inflammatory load climbed one increment higher. It is keeping a record you cannot feel, cannot see, and cannot fully repay. And every time you make the same decision again, the same record gets a new entry. The weekend does not clear it. 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 Just stops it temporarily from getting longer.